right, hello, welcome back. This is the hashtag Ask Android panel. And the reason why it's called hashtag Ask Android is you can actually live tweet your questions to us and they will be answered by this illustrious panel, which includes software engineers and product managers and a bunch of developer relations people and people who are really, really doing the core work to make Android what it is today around the platform. And so we're going to start taking your questions right now. And again, just keep live tweeting them and let's go. So first question is about media permissions. We've moved to granular media permissions in Android 13. But we also added this whole photo picker thing. You know, what should people be doing?
Always fun life. Yeah, so I think, I think everyone's seen for us that storage is something that we really care about and want to make sure that, people give just the right amount of information to apps and just no more than they have to. And it's been a journey, right? We've seen scope storage. We've seen us split up the audio and the photos permission. And Photo Picker is the next tool in the toolbox for people to do that, because we truly do believe that if you are trying to select a single picture or you're trying to do, something that's very granular in scope, we want to give people that choice. And so we also want to add more functionality and want to do that in a privacy safe way. And so Photo Picker is our solution to that. So we want to make sure that you can safely choose a smaller subset of pictures, while also we're going to add more functionality like things like cloud picking as well that we are really excited about too. So just keep that in mind as you're developing things. Think about what users expect. Ask for only what you need, and as long as you do that, you'll be in line with our strategy, which is really focusing on minimal kind of scope for what you want to actually do. Anything to add, Dan?
Yeah, just to add a little on the cloud filling stuff. The storage permission has never given you access to cloud photos, and it's kind of been something that's been long. How to access cloud photos has been a long-standing kind of desire, and we've talked through it a number of times. And it's just having you say, hey, give me access to photos, and they get all the photos on the device plus all the cloud photos is kind of a privacy nightmare. So the photo picker is a really nice way for us to actually give access to cloud photos now in a way that's privacy preserving.
Thank you. All right. So a question from Twitter is, actually this is from YouTube, excuse me. Does Media3 deprecate MediaPlayer?
No, it does not. MediaPlayer is a platform API that ultimately Media3 also uses under the hood. So no, they'll continue to exist, but Media3 just handles kind of a lot of that fragmentation for you, and hopefully makes it easier to develop better media apps.
All right, so what's the best way to think about accessibility if I'm building an app, let's say in Compose?
Yeah, so I think the best time to start thinking about it is at the beginning. So hopefully you're thinking about accessibility starting from the design phase. There are some APIs that were available in the view system to do with accessibility that doesn't exist in Compose, but if you find a use case that you think an API would help with support that, feel free to file an issue in our issue tracker. Some other things we're currently working on is making sure the tools in Android Studio and testing tools for accessibility work better along with Compose as well.
And how do I decide whether I'm using MLKit or a custom ML stack?
I think that's a question for me.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not.
So yeah, in the talk, I touched on that a little bit. It really depends on your machine learning experience. So if you have expertise and you know how to build a model, how to optimize it, then you probably want to build your custom model and use TensorFlow Lite, especially get it through Google Play Services. But if you don't know machine learning very well and you still want to benefit from some of the use cases, and it can be many things like selfie segmentation, object detection. MLKit is really, really nice, very easy to integrate. All the APIs are in Kotlin, so if you are an Android developer, it's pretty straightforward to integrate that in your application.
So one question another question for the panel here is about media session. How can we test media session appropriately to make sure it's been implemented correctly?
Good question. Hopefully, in my talk, as I demonstrated, media session can be fairly complex. So I'm glad that people are thinking about testing. I'll call out two tools. One, I would highly encourage you to make use of the emulators that we have in Android Studio. From personal experience, I know that it's difficult to say buy a car. So if you want to test for Android Auto, I highly recommend that you use the emulators we have available. They should be, very similar to what the IRL experience would be. And if you find any sort of differences, please let us know so we can kind of fix that. The other tool that I'll call out is the Media Controller Test app available on GitHub. It's a super great tool that is basically an open source implementation of a media controller so that you can test kind of your media session, media controller interactions in a more controlled environment.
So AGSL shaders are pretty cool. Is there any way we can get them in Android X?
No. So this is one of those awkward bits of new APIs, new functionality that we add where it depends on capabilities below that layer on the platform itself. In this case, it depended on some changes and enhancements and new APIs at the Skia native as well as higher level APIs. So that really needed to be a platform change that people can adopt as their users get to those platforms. I should point out, though, that it's a little confusing because we call it shaders, but we already had an API that called shaders, right? Since I think 1.0. And they are kind of the same thing. It's just one is programmable. Like AGSL, you can do whatever you want. That is logic that will run on every pixel, on every fragment, doing whatever you want to do with that pixel and color value. We have shaders already. That's why they're also called shaders in 1.0, but they are parameterized, so you can get a linear gradient. You can get different kinds of gradients or different bitmap or color operations. A little more basic, but still sort of the capability to vary per pixel the value that's coming out the other end. So you go ahead and use those. You don't need Android X. They've been on the platform forever, and AGSL adopt when it makes sense.
So, all right, my notifications are delayed. Is Android doing anything about it?
I get this one. I'll quote Tim Cook and say, get a Pixel device, I guess would be one answer. So Pixel, hopefully we're talking about not on Pixel. I mean, I think that there's, there could be a lot of things going on. There's certainly, you should be using FCM. I think our general delivery is good on FCM. There are OEMs who do various things. We've been working with them for a number of years now. Sadly, I don't have any really good news at this point to report. But yeah, we're aware that the OEM customizations are becoming an increasing problem that is causing a lot of trouble for our developers, and we definitely want to improve that.
Yeah, another related question is, what is the best way to run background work reliably across the ecosystem?
Job Scheduler is definitely for background work. Job Scheduler is the right thing to do, and it's and Work Manager. Usually, you use Work Manager. That'll use Job Scheduler underneath, and that is that's definitely a recommended way to do, and that's what all the Google apps use. So it's definitely the widely used thing.
So another question, this isn't related to this at all. Is there any plan to make use of Media3/ExoPlayer easier with Compose?
Good question, and glad to hear that we have more interest in using Compose. It's a feature request that we are aware of, but I don't have anything to announce at the moment. I highly encourage you to head to our GitHub, the Android X Media GitHub, and file a feature request there just to kind of express your interest, and we'll hopefully have better news to share soon.
And speaking of that, we added performance classes, recently, fairly recently in Android. Can the performance class of a device change? And these are mostly around media performance classes.
Yes. To clarify, performance class is assigned to kind of a combination of a device and the build that it's running. So let's say, for example, you have an Android 12 device that is performance class level 12. When it updates to Android 13, if it meets all of the requirements for performance class 13, it'll get upgraded to that higher performance class level.
So kind of changing topics again. When we're talking about predictive back is kind of a big new thing that we sort of quietly introduced in Android 13. What kind of strategy would you have for migrating to your app to using predictive back?
I guess it's just me. Yes, so predictive back is a multi-year strategy to try and give developers time to understand this shift to this ahead of time model that I mentioned in the talk. So in Android 13, we have already released an update to the Android X library at 1.6. So I would strongly recommend, first of all, using the Android X library because that way you're going to get a lot of the features out of the box for free. If you don't intercept the back gesture, which many apps actually don't, then the migration strategy for you is primarily add the flag in your manifest, test how your app works, particularly in just the back to home is where you're going to see that animation in Android 13. And also the user right now is behind a developer option. So it's a pretty safe way that we launched predictive back. And Android 14, obviously, we're going to be releasing more features and doubling down on that back gesture to have not only the back to home piece, but within app, you're going to see that predictive piece. So my recommendation would be Android X library for sure, testing, but also there are many checks that are going to happen to ensure that your app behaves nicely.
So this one's interesting. Can app shortcuts be enrolled for Android 13's dynamic icon theming? Anyone? We'll get back to you on that one. Not everyone knows everything, as it turns out. Okay, so another question is we talked a bunch about Camera 2 today, and we also have, of course, CameraX. And where should someone be looking to target Camera 2 versus CameraX?
Yes. So the first thing is that Camera 2 is part of the platform, which we update yearly, right? So Android 13, Android 14, 15, and so on for. CameraX is built on top of Camera 2, and it's Google's Jetpack library that allows you to, that makes it a lot easier, right? It handles a lot of the things like fragmentation and a lot of things that you would have to kind of deal with yourself if you go into Camera 2. So what we kind of recommend, Google's we start with CameraX first, start with the Jetpack library. It'll handle a lot of things and handle most of the simple use cases like take an image, simple video. If you want to get deeper than that, if you want to do things like most social media apps will be doing today, kind of control the camera system frame rates, all these different things, I would then start to say, okay, start to investigate Camera 2 a little deeply and start to integrate there. The thing is, I think there's a perception that CameraX is just not as powerful as Camera 2, which is not true. We're kind of trying to shift this combative, more so, it's Camera 2 versus CameraX to a more CameraX and Camera 2 model where it's you start off with CameraX. If you need more, then start to investigate deeper into Camera 2. And we're working on not only providing more resources on making Camera 2 a lot easier to understand and develop for, but as well as get developers more, I guess you can say, less afraid of Camera 2 and how a little bit complex it can be sometimes.
If I can add to that too, I'm going to jump in. I was talking to the CameraX team a couple of years ago about this exact issue, and the way they viewed their API and their functionality was more use case driven. So as you said, the easier path and the frankly very powerful path is to use CameraX. But if you find that your use case goes out of the specific ones that CameraX provides, that's sort of where you may dip into the platform APIs more directly, right? So
Exactly.
it doesn't necessarily do everything that Camera 2 does by design. Instead, it should do most of what you need in a much easier way.
Exactly.
So, and one of the other questions that came in, with so many manufacturers doing all these different things on their devices, how can we as Google enhance the photo experience in social media across the board?
Interesting question. I think that one of the things that we are trying to do, and this is why we're taking a lot of developer feedback now. Like, obviously, with every platform release, we take in as much as we can ahead of time and focus on those issues. Like, a lot of the things that we've put into Android 13 are things that were directly asked by developers for the functionality that they wanted for the newer versions and moving on. I think that, improving photo quality across the board, we're trying to see, like, maybe at some point, I can't announce anything yet, nothing's necessarily solid, but I would say that, we're looking to make things a lot more standard. The reason why CameraX is powerful is because we also have our own test suites as well, right? We have literally a lab. I think we just recently posted a blog post about it, like why you should use CameraX, because we actually test so many things for you. CTS testing, making sure that the rotation is happening well on several different device models and manufacturers to provide a more consistent experience when using the library, right? And in going towards that route, you get all of these things for free. Whereas if you go Camera 2, here's the perfect analogy. CameraX is kind of like a pre-built plane, like an airplane. Is like, here's how you fly this thing. Okay, Camera 2 is like, here's all of the pieces of an airplane. You have to build the whole airplane yourself, and so it's kind of like in that way we're trying to just standardize how it goes in terms of like just making sure that everything is pretty much as good as we can get. I would love more feedback on that actually, and how we can improve the quality overall.
You definitely are not selling the ease of use of Camera 2. So, all right. So is there any plan to change the DEX file format to remove the 65K method limit? Any thoughts?
I haven't heard anything.
All right. There we are. We don't know.
I think we've learned to live with it.
We've learned to live with it, yeah. So one of the questions is when we've obviously implemented dynamic color. And how does an app maintain its own integral brand while still leveraging this really important feature for users to be able to customize their device?
I think this is a very important question. Yes, so I touched upon it briefly. When you're creating up your theme, you can actually extend the out of the box dynamic color tokens to create any additional color tokens you might need. So the example I gave before was, maybe you always want that hang up button to be red. So you can actually go and create that custom token for that, hang up red color that you might have. Now, there are kind of two ways that you can kind of then take this. So either you decide that the color can be harmonized. So out of the box from Android 12, there's a harmonized color API, which will actually harmonize that color. So you might upload a certain color, but then it might get shifted to ensure that it meets all of those amazing contrast ratios that I was touching upon. And if you don't want the color to be touched at all, potentially in the brand example, if your brand color is say yellow and you always want to have that yellow in a particular hue of that yellow, then you can actually just extend it and not harmonize it at all. Something I would then plug is then the Material Theme Builder. The Material Theme Builder has a Figma plugin, and you can access it on the web, where you can actually upload, an example wallpaper and actually test what the different colors would look like and trying to work out exactly what you want. And then from there, you can actually export either the compose files of the themes and colors and type, or XML ones if you're on a view-based app. And so there you can actually then just extract that straight into Android Studio, test it out how it looks, and so ultimately getting the experience that you want.
So for a long time, we've had notification channels in Android, and now we have the new notification permission. How does this work with notification channels?
I think we've always had these notification channels, but I think what we were seeing is that it's a lot for people to actually manage all of these individually, and more importantly, we weren't seeing a lot of people actually going into settings and changing things. What we wanted to do with the permission actually is bring this up front for people to make that choice, so that they know exactly whether or not they want to let an app grant this permission or not. And just like most things, we want to make sure that people exercise that choice. And so they work hand in hand. The notification permission is an overarching yes or no, and then the channel still exists. So if people want to go in and say, you know what, I want these kinds of notifications and not others, that choice still exists. It's not going away. But the change with the notification permission is just to ask that upfront. So instead of by default granting the app the permission, we are now asking users to make that choice upfront.
And we've always had the big toggle for like notifications for the application, whether they're on and off. So it's really just surfacing that toggle up at it starts out off now, and you have to get it turned on.
Yeah, I think it's kind of nice because for an app, they've already should be able to handle the case where they don't have notification permission. So this just makes it clear to the user. We're almost out of time, but last question is, if you want to learn about Android, especially as a beginner, where's the best place to go? Any thoughts from the panel?
Your IDE, start writing code.
I think the developer relations team recently put out a Jetpack Compose Android Basics course. That's a really good place to start learning Android, including how to start building your app and the best practices to follow from the start.
I personally like to learn from example, and we have tons of samples available to kind of parse through and learn from based on what sorts of use cases you're looking at. So highly encourage you to dig into all of our sample apps.
Learn Kotlin.
And leverage the out-of-the-box templates in Android Studio. So you don't need to start from scratch. There's actually a lot of good templates that you can use, extend and copy and paste the examples diligently, and then from there you've got already basically an app up and running.
And I did want to mention we've got Compose camps going on around the world, so you can sign up and you can learn with others if that's how you learn better. And that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much for submitting your questions, and huge thanks to the panel for coming up here and asking them live. And we're going to continue the Android Dev Summit live stream with a bunch of interesting talks, so stay tuned.